you take a nap, you wake up in 10 years, you'll see that this was an incredible time to build incredible companies, and you'll be like, wow, I wish I created one of those, because you'll have all these amazing new unicorns and incredible companies that we all use 10 years from now that started yesterday.
Building a business has arguably never been harder. Look, I can't sit here and tell you how to do it because unfortunately, I never have. But through hosting Tech Talks, a podcast that I've been running now for over 10 years and publishing over 700 episodes, I've interviewed some of the biggest success stories in technology, from Atom Bank, Zilch, Darktrace, and Revolut. In July 2020, I interviewed Joe Griston, who at the time was the Chief Talent Officer at Arrival. That episode has gone on to be the most popular episode of Tech Talks ever. In it, Joe talks about his journey with the business, where he took them from around 30 staff to 800 staff whilst in stealth mode. That episode is obviously hugely valuable to so many people, but it's also a cautionary tale. A year after I interviewed Joe, they were valued at over $9 billion. But today, the business has collapsed.
When I first joined this company, I had kind of carte blanche to do anything I wanted to improve how we hired people and build the culture. And the first thing we did was just rip up job descriptions and job ads. A company will be defined by its people. If they can execute and operate in the right way, that's really, really going to help out their success. So the people are vastly important.
Arrival's story shows how difficult success can be, and I wanted to find out from entrepreneurs what challenges they face today. What are investors looking for in this difficult and complex market? And how can corporate businesses benefit? Is there a new model for growth in technology companies emerging? It's against this backdrop that I've come to Copenhagen for Tech Barbecue, the Nordic's largest innovation conference, to ask that question: how do you build a technology business?
Of course, the best way to find out how you build a business is to talk to the people who are actually doing it. So before heading over to the conference itself, I sat down with a few founders, starting with Isabella.
Who are FocalX as a business?
At FocalX, we're helping companies in the automotive space with their vehicle handover processes to cut costs there by helping them detect more damage and making the process way quicker.
So if you're talking about a business that can service an industry where there might be a fleet of 2 million vehicles potentially, and you're an automation-powered business, that's a hell of a lot of data to process.
Yeah.
How has that challenge and that scale of data impacted the way that you're building your business?
So there's different aspects of this. So there's the upfront component, which is when we started building the business, we needed massive amount of data sets, because imagine if you have 2 million cars in one customer, you have inspections happening in all sorts of conditions. Right now we have a production setup in one of the clouds, and that's where we're running, and then we're constantly doing different partnerships with that cloud provider to make sure that the cost is lowered down. But obviously, it's a big strain on the business.
One of the key objectives of technology is to drive efficiencies, and now people are being asked to do the same. But team sizes are shrinking, workloads are increasing, and pay rises are rarer. That should create a perfect recipe for you to hire disillusioned top talent. But technologists are demanding. They want greater flexibility, both in their working patterns and the cultures within which they operate. So, are the entrepreneurs building organizations grasping this opportunity to hire that top talent, or are they missing out to big tech companies with deeper pockets?
It's hard. It's really hard to compete with them. However, I think that a lot of people, especially the younger generation, are caring way more about the mission and the impact focus. And so for us, we've been able to get about 9 employees on board for equity purely and not taking a salary until we fundraised. So for us, it's worked really well because they care so much about our mission.
Is this your first startup? Are you a first-time founder, or?
Yeah, I've tried like small things here and there, but
Yeah.
years ago. But yeah, this is my first proper founder experience. I used to be in VC and startup mentoring before. So I've been in the space for a while, but yeah, this is a totally different ballgame.
We've been super scrappy from the start. So, and we've needed to figure out how to save on cost to be able to do this at all. So one example is that we have built the entire company remote. And we have done that because the kind of resources that we need also in data and data analysis and the amount of people, we need to do that upfront processing of the data. We wouldn't be able to find that at a cost that we could live with in Denmark. So, or just find the talent for it as such. So we have built our entire tech department in India, where both of my co-founders are from. So one of my co-founders lives here and one of them lives in India. Mm-hmm. So we've been remote from the start.
Whilst Isabella and Sonia were able to talk about their experiences in today's market, I felt it was a good idea to sit down with someone who'd been through a successful growth story and get their view. Depop was founded in 2011 and acquired by Etsy for $1.6 billion 10 years later in 2021.
So I started at Depop when we were like a team of 10 people. I was the first marketing person there, which means that I probably had 3 or 4 different job titles because, well, that's what you do when you work in a startup. You need to be flexible and really change as the time changes. I was there for 4.5 years, and when I left, I was doing global communications, and I was doing a lot of the work actually of the rebranding of Depop because we went through big rebranding at the time. I do think in the startup world, there was a tendency to, when you get an injection of money, you go and you hire without thinking much. It happened before. It happened in companies I worked at. And then suddenly you can see that they are cutting people because they didn't grow as fast as they thought they would grow. So there are a lot of excuses there. And right now, talking about AI and how you're implementing AI, it makes your company look like that you're embracing new technology fast and that you're breaking things and that you're building something new. So I think there is something of this story going on there as well. I was actually talking to a founder friend not long ago, and he got funds, no problem. He had founded companies before, so it was very easy, relatively easy for him to get funds. But then he was saying, Taina, I hired like 30 people, and then suddenly there was a lot of, red tape and complexity, and I didn't need it. So I had to actually cut my team in half because it was slowing down my startup. And if you're starting up, you want to do it fast. You don't want to wait forever, right, for things to happen. So I think there is a bit of this balance as well. For you to move things fast, the more people you have, you are increasing complexity as well.
Having sat down and spoken to founders, I thought it was probably best to head over to Tech Barbecue itself, a conference which this year attracted over 9,000 attendees, many of them entrepreneurs and investors, so the perfect place to further explore some of the issues that we'd heard raised.
You're beautifully branded today.
I am, right? As for the occasion here at Tech Barbecue, so they put some new colors on me. Talent management, talent retention specifically, is something that should be considered alongside, the emergence of generative AI. People are feeling more freed up to do some of their funny tasks, some of that they feel that can ignite their creativity some way, because they find that time reduced by generative AI in more, in other tasks, so to say.
There's this continuous theme in the industry at the moment with this idea that Gen AI is going to replace jobs. But actually, when Nash Squared spoke to digital leaders, we found that their sentiment was that this was likely to be evolutionary rather than revolutionary.
Whilst that might be true in enterprise-scale organisations, the current market means that startups and scale-ups have had to embrace occasional revolution to stay competitive.
I think when you try and explore this in an enterprise setup, you have, quite some stakeholders to deal with. You have different disciplines, in under the same roof, and you have sayings from different part of the organizations. There's governance aspect of it, there's the legal aspect of it, and before you roll something out, you have to check so many different boxes.
Ben, I'm here talking to different startup founders, investors. You're someone who I've known for a few years now. And when I met you, your business proposition was a little bit different to the one that it is now.
Yes.
How has it evolved? Why has it evolved?
I think there are two different things. So how it evolved is we moved away from a typical B2C platform provider into really a SaaS company, offering creators the ability to launch apps really simple, really fast, and then for a reasonable price. And the why is definitely the market, I would say. So we started it with a vision and an idea, but on the way we figured out that the people, the creators that we back in the days onboarded to our social platform that we built by then, didn't want it actually that. They want to have their own platforms, they want to become independent. So the why was the market, definitely.
I think where the startups are a bit more fortunate is that they can test, they can break, go back to status quo and try again at a more shortened timeline. So I think startups and scale-ups are fortunate to have that ability to scale rapidly compared to enterprises, and they don't necessarily have to get things right from the very first time. But I also do think that when you're an enterprise and you're getting to experiment with this technology, you usually do it internally first to see how it impacts your employees. How are your stakeholders internally reacting to this? How are they using this in their everyday life? And if that's a success, you can move it outside and offer it as a feature in your application to customers as well.
After Google hired the Character AI founding team, Fortune magazine suggested that there was a new strategy for those companies fighting for dominance in the AI space. Hire the teams and the founders behind high-profile AI startups. And Google aren't alone. Amazon and Microsoft have made similar moves. So, what do big tech organizations really think of the startup scene? Do you think startups are viewed as a good way for big enterprise organizations like yourselves to jump innovation? You know, they're out there and they're innovating. Yeah. You're looking at those partnerships. We've seen a lot of startups being acquired by big tech.
Yeah.
Is that something you talk about internally?
No, not that much, but we are aware of, new perspectives and new ways that features can perform. At the moment, we see so many different technologies popping up, not necessarily groundbreaking innovations, but a feature or a product that can basically enhance an existing process. Obviously, the big enterprise investors are very aware of new groundbreaking innovation, but I wouldn't say that we're out there looping for the new acquisition target of any sort. But we work very closely together with startups in our startup ecosystem.
Some businesses appear to be pursuing AI because of the soaring levels of investment. That's despite many AI-led startups looking a long way short of achieving profitability. So it does beg the question whether investors are causing us to focus on technology in an unhealthy way to the detriment of customer-centric, sustainable company building.
I mean, of course, it is a VC's role to the extent that they can to guide a startup on, the best allocation of capital. But at the end of the day, as a minority investor, you're not the one calling the shots. Ideally, you're just choosing the founder who knows how to make the right decisions. I think when you find yourself in a bubble where everyone coming out with the kind of buzzword of the moment, which in this case is everything around the AI, the LLMs, able to raise a lot of capital, that helps their peers. So it maybe makes these large raises more accessible to companies in this kind of hyped up space. That does bring the risk that money won't be allocated in the most efficient way. But that being said, the vision that these founders have to kind of realize the potential of AI, to make AGI happen and quickly, because it's such an intense race, does require vast amounts of capital.
Do you think investors really understand the technology? I mean, I know it's their job to understand, and you hope that they've kind of done research on your business.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of excitement about emerging technology. Do you think that's influencing their decision making?
I would say it's easier to attract attention with AI from investors. So I will find it out today, speaking with investors, is it like really key factor for them to invest in the business? And is it easier for me if I mention AI to move forward with some actions like contact them again and so on. It should not be just as a word, it should be useful and it should align with your long-term strategy.
I don't think that there's necessarily a pressure from investors to have AI. However, if you have it on your deck and you have it in your text, it absolutely gets you in the door.
It's odd because it's almost in direct conflict with the idea that they're emphasizing profitability now.
Yeah.
Because there are so many AI startups out there with huge valuations that are nowhere near profitability.
Yeah.
So it's odd that that is something that gets you in the door.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think, and I would hope that a lot of the smarter investors would go, okay, cool, like you have AI on it, but what is it? Like, let's actually dig deep into what is the tech that you're using and how are you using AI? So I think it definitely gets in the door, but I would hope that they're not writing checks just on that.
Yeah.
For some reason, people see glory in VC. There's no glory. Like, VCs suck often. Most of them suck. They ruin your companies quite often. They make you do stuff, or you will be incentivized to do things that you don't want to do. When you're on a treadmill, you got to keep running as fast as the treadmill. The first VC you take money from, the speed just got faster. The second VC you take money from, it got even faster. So you need to decide if VC is the right route for you, and it doesn't have to be.
One recent episode of Tech Talks featured Gendo, an AI-powered platform for architects who've just successfully raised $1.1 million worth of funding. In the episode, George Proud, the co-founder, told me that one of the questions he was asked was whether or not they could be a unicorn business. And in truth, he hadn't really considered that to that point. I suppose it asks the question, what's more important, scale or profitability? Like, it's always been that thing, you know, hypergrowth, they're looking for hypergrowth.
Yeah.
Is that still the case? And I imagine when you were an investor, that might have been something you were looking for.
Yeah.
Do you feel it's shifting, or is that
Massively.
still, yeah?
Yeah, massively shifting. And I think we're going to hear that a lot at Tech Barbecue now, actually, when we have a lot of investors on the panel. But I think they are very much looking into profitability now. Because, yeah, the market isn't great, and I don't think they want these like ridiculous valuations now because, yeah, they just don't know where that's going to end up. So I think they're like, let's actually, obviously you can't just be a small business and have a bit of profit and have like slower growth. Like, that's not VC backable. But I do think that they're looking for this middle ground now as to like, you're profitable, but you can scale, but at a pace where you can keep up with and not just kind of scale super fast and potentially crash.
Because what I'm hearing here is that a lot of founders are now really thinking about how they can bootstrap to a degree. Obviously they're looking to raise money, but there's more rigor, it's slightly slower. The market's moving so quick, but they're having to be a little bit more considered and careful about the decisions that they're making.
Yeah, but I think also that the market in terms of the investors and the venture capital also changed a bit. So there's not so much money flooded into startups that are just coming around with a good idea and people are just throwing money at them. I think that changed in the last years. So you really have to provide some actual numbers, and in best case you come around with some really good monthly recurring revenue numbers that investors love to see before they invest.
Kathy, I've known you for a number of years. You've got the benefit of talking as someone in public relations to a lot of startups. When you're talking to them at the minute, we keep getting this recurring question about profitability or growth. What are your clients talking to you about?
So most of the clients we end up working with have obviously raised venture capital.
Yep.
So most of them are going for growth over profitability. But regardless of whether it's profitability or growth, they have the same problem. And I think in the current market, as we're kind of shifting out of 2022, 21 and the downfall and everything, it's the consistently changing goalposts. So in order for me to grow the business more and raise that next round of venture capital, I need to achieve X. But by the time I've achieved X, the investor is now saying, hey, actually, no, it needs to be Y. And I think that slight uncertainty about exactly what they need to hit is frustrating. And it's something that we hear regularly.
Many of the best businesses that we know today, Airbnb, Uber, and others, are all actually started in market downturns. Because when the market is strong and it's easy to get cash, you're incentivized to use other people's money, i.e. VC money, to acquire customers. And then in the long run, your unit economics, how much it costs to acquire the customer, CAC, customer acquisition cost, versus LTV, lifetime value, usually your unit economics don't work. So once the VC money stops or the economy slows down, you're in trouble. On the other hand, if you're in a downturn, you can't figure out how to just get a lot of free money. You have to figure out how to do something basic, which is make more money than you spend.
I think the fundamentals of building a startup, I think they largely remain the same at the core, but I do think that there's a new resilience to the entrepreneurs that are still kicking. More of an open mind towards how can I bootstrap as far as possible or do more with less? How can I scale my product without scaling my team? Because there are now products out there that make coding and development much more efficient with fewer resources or with a lower entry point or skill set required. Or we can automate sales prospecting, customer service as a function. That has been, I think, a really big enabler to support founders going out to raise and when they're considering, what do we need the capital for? So I think that has helped. But I think especially coming out of this boom to bust post-21 period where we're starting to see this increase in deal frequency, I think there will be definitely an emphasis on speed, competitiveness. So it should be an interesting, coming year.
There are more startups, and the world in which they operate has significantly altered since I interviewed Joe in 2020. In fact, if you look at the US alone, from pre to post-pandemic, business applications for startups have increased by over 50% alone. There's been a startup boom. Look, I know this is going to be slightly difficult to answer because you weren't a founder in 2014, say. But do you think that building a startup today is fundamentally different to 2014 or 2004, or are a lot of the same rules still in place?
I think fundamentally that a lot of the same rules are still in place. There's always new technologies coming up. There's always, hype waves, and it will continue to be like that. Now, what has changed is, I would say, the speed of it being possible to build a startup that actually creates value for customers, both in just the tech space, because there's so much, even if you're building a bit more horizontal and you can take from many places and you can build something that's really good in not that long, right? So I definitely see the barrier of entry going down over time, and also with AI.
But your window of opportunity is smaller. If the barrier comes down, you have to be quicker in what you're doing.
People are building way faster, and that means that there will be more. If there's an unserved market and someone understands that it's there, other people will understand it too, and start building for that. So I think that we will see startups more rapidly, starting and dying than we've seen before.
The lessons from our time here in Copenhagen are that the barriers to entry have been significantly reduced and access to capital has only increased. And then look at technology. The tools available to entrepreneurs today give them razor-sharp focus and allow them to enter professions and markets where they hadn't previously been able to disrupt. That's the lesson that we can take away from Depop's success, as well as Sonia's story and Isabella's. But with that surge comes danger. Fear of missing out is genuine, and the window for getting decisions right is getting smaller. In fact, decisions that entrepreneurs have to make are coming at breakneck speed, and it's a challenge. It may even cause them, like Ben, to change their whole proposition. How significantly has the market changed in the last couple of years to the market in which you've operated over the last 10 years?
What first thing come to my mind is that you should be very fast. Like right now, the industry, especially tech industry, is very fast. Everything is changing. Like new solutions are coming. Also a lot of customers' expectations are there. And you should it's very fast right now, and you should be agile to adapt to these challenges and use every opportunity.
What I do think changed is that people are being much more careful about money. Mm-hmm. We are in very uncertain times because of war, because of inflation. So everyone's pretty worried. So it's not a free-for-all anymore. And I think people are realizing that for a few years now. And you can talk to founders that maybe are trying to do it without a VC, or are trying to think of different ways to start their business that leverage on less people. Maybe AI helps with that. So I think that's what changes, is like, you cannot just go in a hiring spree, now and just hire. I want all these people in the room. I don't think that works anymore. I don't think that's fashionable anymore as it used to be. It was much easier before to just spend money for the sake of it and then we talk about it later. I don't think that's the case now.
Whilst the fundamentals of company building haven't changed, it's gotten harder. The success stories of tomorrow are going to have to show huge resilience to succeed, and they're going to have to forge their own path.
I think what we want to see is the companies that have been resilient through that period have continued to show traction over the challenging past few years despite having less resources. The element of the market which is competitive is the few diamonds in the rough that can actually show that they've gained traction through a challenging period. I think the majority of the market will be the case that startups that have had a challenging 3 years maybe can't show that consistent growth that we need to see at the Series A and B to come in. So I think vast majority of rounds that will be coming out now will have a pretty tough story to tell and have to convince us that now is the inflection point, that growth is going to take off.
It's sometimes ironic I'm building a mental health app because when you're fundraising and you're pitching to over 50 investors and you're waking up every day with emails saying no, no, no. So it's a lot to deal with, to be completely honest. So I think you can explain it to someone and say this is what it's like to be a founder, but it's a whole different ball game.
Pulling together this session, one thing that you want founders to take away to help them through this market.
I mean, have persistence, do what you love. If you don't love doing it, don't create the startup, because startups suck and you don't get the fun out of it till years later. So if you love it and you're passionate about it and you really want to fight through all of that, go through it, be persistent. Do not listen to the people that tell you it's a good idea. Do not listen to the people that tell you it's a bad idea. Just put one foot in front of the next. Before you know it, you ran a marathon and then you've accomplished great things.
Amazing. Slava, thank you so much for your time. Cool. Thanks.